Aposimz is both fascinating and interesting. And let's be honest, I love Nihei. He is, I say it every time I talk about him on the channel, he is maybe my favorite mangaka ever. And I say maybe just because I'm pretty new to manga. I've only been reading manga for a couple of years now, so it's kind of hard to say. But anyway, you have something like Aposimz, which just seems to be so polarizing because you will have people online saying things like, Nihei has fallen off, or he's lost his passion and he's gotten lazy, or he's just chasing trends now. And then on the other side of that, you'll have people saying that they're sad that this ended, and they are theorizing that it was canceled because it wasn't popular, and that's a sad thing because this was the best shonen arc for a character that Nihei's ever written. So with a division like that among Nihei's own fans, I couldn't help myself. I just had to see it for myself. So after having read it, I can genuinely say that the naysayers, I feel, are wrong. I think this is good, like quite good. I really enjoyed it pretty much all the way through. Now, I'm not saying that this is a perfect manga and that it has no faults. I have issues with it myself. And if I'm being honest, it's probably, of the 3 Nihei manga that I have read, I would probably put it in 3rd place, but that's not exactly saying much considering that I felt like the other 2 were basically like a 9 out of 10 and a 10 out of 10. Like Blam is like just peak manga as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, let's go ahead and get going here. Now, what I'm going to do with this one, just because I don't know how many people have actually read this one, it doesn't feel like it's quite as top tier popular as some of the other mangas that I've done like walkthroughs for and gone right up to the end and talked about it, which the ending of this is actually one of my favorite parts, so I really, really want to talk about the ending. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about this in a relative, general, overarching, spoiler-free way for like 90% of this video. And then I'll give my overall rating for the manga. Then I'll give you a little couple seconds to duck out before I continue on and I go full spoilers on the ending and a little bit of like theorizing about this manga and the larger Nihei universe in general. If you don't know what Aposimz is a manga about an artificial celestial body out in outer space named Aposimz. This is a kind of artificial planet where people survive on the surface, but they struggle to survive on the surface because it is this frozen wasteland. On the surface of this planet, you have normal people. You also have people that are called regular frames. Those are essentially peoples with special powers. Then on this planet, there is an evil empire, and this evil empire is trying to get into the core of the planet for reasons. In the process of doing this, the empire is basically going through wiping out entire groups of people, and they wipe out Aitharo's town. Aitharo is our main character. In the process, he becomes a regular frame, gaining those powers I was talking about, and now he's on a path for revenge. Now, first things first, like usual, I have to talk about the art, because if you're going to read what's essentially a picture book and spend hours upon hours looking at pictures, we have to talk about the art when it comes to a review. And Nihei's art is just, oh my god, I love it. It's just my favorite. It is his art. It has such a Nihei style and flair to it. You can't look at one of his pictures and not know exactly who drew it. Then, at the same time, they all somehow have their own little like style to each manga. You see Blam and you know it's Blam because it looks like Blam art. You see Knights of Sidonia and it's somehow starkly different, but still looks like him at the same time. Now here we are with Aposimz and it's the same thing. It is immediately recognizable as his art, but then at the same time, it somehow has its own style strictly for Aposimz, and it doesn't look like those other ones. The haunting loneliness of Blam or the deep, dark blacks of Knights of Sidonia, this is very different. And this one is by far the most pared back of all of his art that I've ever seen, and by far the most minimalistic. And This is where I hear people say that he got lazy and that he doesn't draw like he used to, and he doesn't take the time to put detail into it, and it just doesn't look good like his old art did. And even I, as a huge fan of him, was a little off-put by it at first because it just doesn't feel or look like some of the older stuff does. It is so minimalistic that it just like lines don't even feel like they've been drawn all the way. There's just gaps. And I don't know, it wasn't very long, but after probably halfway through volume 1, it like clicked in my brain what he's doing here. It's like an accurate representation of what it would feel like to be on that planet. I live in Ohio, and it's not the coldest place here in the winters, but we do have genuine winters sometimes. And we've had legitimate blizzards in my lifetime where you go outside and you're trying to trounce through 1.5 feet of snow. The roads are covered in snow. The cars are covered in snow. Everything you see in sight is completely just drenched in snow. There is not one object outside that isn't white. Then the noonday sun comes out and blasts down on that, and it is so blindingly white that everything you see almost gets completely washed out by the sun and the whiteness. And then I open up this book, and that is exactly what it feels like when you're looking at the pictures. It looks like there isn't any detail because you can't have the detail in this environment. It is just so blown out by the sun and the snow and just the environment that you're in, to the point where lines don't even complete themselves because you can't even fucking see them. And the more I read through it and the more I flipped pages, I was like, that is just, it feels so accurate and just so perfect. Like that is what it should look like. And then there's like 2 tones, white and the one shade that he uses for shading. And once again, it just feels so accurate because once again, you go out in that blinding light in that kind of an environment and you step in and there's like the bright white of this and the one shade that you get when you're under something and you're shaded from that brightness. I don't know. I feel like, as minimalistic as it is, I feel like it was a design decision, and I feel like it accurately represents what it would look and feel like to be in this environment. Now, I could be wrong, and he could have just been lazy and fucking off, but I don't think so. Also, real quick, before I leave the whole art section of the video, I do love that he still continues to open every single chapter with just a still shot of something. No dialogue, no nothing, just an image of a person or a couple of characters either walking or sitting. And it has that real, sometimes it's a real distinctly bland feel to him, and other times it's a real distinctly Knights of Sidonia vibe. But he always starts his chapters with just a still image, and I love it. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk about the story. Now, this is your typical evil empires going around the world just devastating entire groups of people in the name of saving the world, and they're going to be everybody's salvation. Oh, and our protagonist, who just got his new powers, got the one power that's going to be able to fight the Emperor and take him down. But also because he's brand new to having his power, he's somehow exceptionally good at using it, and he's going to have to go around killing a bunch of people and leveling up so that he can go take on the Emperor. It is essentially like trope after trope after trope stacked on top of each other, wrapped up in the style of Tsutomu Nihei, and then just kind of handed to you. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying that this is necessarily a downside for the manga. Because if this is done right, this is essentially the manga equivalent of comfort food. And I'm here to say, in my opinion, it's mostly done right. Now, to that, I will say that I thought the absolute weakest part of this entire thing was the beginning. It was kind of like a cold open. It felt rushed. I didn't feel much of anything for anyone in any way, which is a bad thing. I didn't feel like a real connection to any of the characters. I didn't feel a connection to Aithro. I didn't feel a connection to any of his friends and family or whoever was around when the Empire came in and kind of just started killing everybody. I just didn't care at all, which once again, like I said, not great, you know, I feel like it was supposed to be a hook and I wasn't very hooked by it. But then once the main story gets going and the mysteries start to seep into it and start to build up a little bit, then it gets good. So, which is just such a bummer to say that the beginning's bad, because that's the part that's essentially, in theory, should grab you. And not the best in this one. But then it's a little bit weird because at times it kind of feels like this weird Nihei word salad of words that he's used before. Like everything's named either megastructure, placenta, or Higgs particles, whatever they are, which is all words that come from older manga that he's used. It just feels weird at times reading through it. But then at the same time, it adds this weird feeling like these manga could actually be taking place in the same universe, just at different places and at different times in that universe's time frame or history timeline or whatever I'm trying to say. It really does feel like this could be the Aposimz from the Knights of Sidonia manga, even though there are some very glaring differences, like that was a ship and this is a planet. But all in all, I thought it was really well done. And with the desolate environment that we have here and the way that he draws, it brought back a lot of Blam vibes as you're going through it. And as far as I'm concerned, that's always a plus. It kind of feels like Blam with way more talking, which is actually kind of a downside because I don't know. One of the strengths to Blam was the fact that there was no dialogue whatsoever, at least so minimalistic. And then it is a lot of it here, like lots of it. And it's not really great. A lot of times the dialogue in here just kind of feels a little bit clunky. I don't know. Not that it was bad, it just not as good as it could have been. Also, the characters feel pretty flat. They do get better as time goes on, kind of like the opening was weak, but the story gets better as you get into the midsection. Same with the characters. You get much more invested in a lot of these characters as the manga goes on. But they were a little bit flatter than some other manga. Now, speaking of characters, there is one character who's the brother of one of the main characters. And there's a certain point in the manga where he goes through some shit. And then he will ultimately break bad. And instead of joining the Empire, he goes off and creates the Church of the True Core. And he becomes by far probably my favorite character of the entire manga. He'll show up just at random, like with this crazy cloak standing on top of a mountain with his like followers behind him, and he starts spreading plagues and frame disease and all this shit. Dude, some of the coolest going on in this manga was because of him. And I mean, he's just in the background fucking shit up all the time. I loved it. My favorite part. Just every time he was like, I turned the page and there he was, I was like, yes. Not to mention that after he kind of became a main central focus of the story, the whole manga took a different like tone and feel. It just felt so much more like apocalyptic. I don't know. And then there's the ending of the manga. Don't worry, I'm not in spoiler territory yet. But the ending was by far my favorite part of the story. If the beginning was my least favorite part, the ending was my favorite. But also, like the beginning, I will say that the ending felt a little rushed, which is why I've heard a lot of people say that they think that this was canceled because it's so abbreviated, which may be true. I don't know. But even if it was canceled and he had to kind of rush the ending, this is 9 volumes long. And that's almost par for the course for him. His Blam and Knights of Sidonia, I think, were like 10 and like 14 volumes, so not a whole lot longer than this. He probably would have been in the back end of the story no matter what. But anyway, the answers to all of those mysteries were just pitch perfect, could not have been better. The ideas and concepts on display when he wrapped this up with the ending, I could not have been any happier with. I didn't see it coming, and I feel like it was just pitch perfect. Maybe the best ending he's ever written. Maybe, in my opinion. But anyway, all in all, with all of its flaws and everything like that, taken into consideration, the weak beginning, but that pitch perfect ending, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say that I think this lands for me at an 8 out of 10. And the ending was impressive enough to me that I'm going to say that if you have not read it, stop the video here, because from here on out, I'm going to go into a little bit of spoiler territory, because I just kind of want to talk about that ending and some mental gymnastics that I have done to tie it in with the rest of the universe. So in the end, the church goes through the entire planet and basically turns the entire planet into essentially the Nihei version of a zombie apocalypse. So much so to the point where everything and everyone is literally gone, and the only two people left on the entire planet are Ithro and the Emperor. And then we learn that Titania is essentially the god being of the core, and the core isn't even a place where people could even exist. The core is a database of information where human minds have been stored since God knows when. And even the people on the surface, as they live their lives, their consciousness is constantly being backed up to the core. That way, when they die, they kind of go back to a new life existing in the core as like digital data. Actually, they started out that way. There was never any life on this planet. It was only the data in the core. At some point, people decided, the minds in the core decided they wanted real lives on the surface, which there was never intended to be life there. That's why it's so desolate and so cold. And then they had to somehow manufacture living organisms, human bodies, out of God knows what, and then download these minds into them. But then once there was an existence on the surface, they could not go back and forth. They couldn't let them come back to the core. They had to live out their existence up there. But in order to make sure things didn't get too far out of control, Titania chose one person to be the chosen one to run the surface, and that was the Emperor. So essentially, Titania, our main character this whole time, one of our main characters, was actually the god of the core and hand-selected the Emperor to be the chosen one and gave him the power of the future sight. But eventually, over time, he became warped and twisted, and now he's out of control. So now Titania has hand-chosen Ithro and also specifically created a power just for him in order to counterbalance the Emperor. So that weird, typical, oh, well, I guess he just showed up, and I guess he just has the power to go against the Emperor. There is a very specific reason for that, and that is Titania. She made him just to do this. Then on top of all of that, we learn that because the power that she gave to the Emperor was the power of future sight, essentially one of the first things that he ever saw when he looked into the future was his own death. And that death would come at the hands of another chosen one that Titania chose to take him out and kill him. And essentially, that drove him crazy. He has spent the last who knows how many hundreds of years attempting to change the future so that A, he wouldn't die, and B, his death wouldn't come at the hands of the betrayal of the one person who created him and his ability in the first place. That was just such a mind fuck for him. He literally couldn't handle it. And then it all devolves to the point where by the time he dies, after being chosen by Titania, she reveals to him that he's done so many bad things that his consciousness cannot be allowed to return to the core. So everybody else gets to live this second life in eternity in the core, except for him. He has to be deleted. It's like, damn, that was dark as fuck. You are the chosen one, chosen by her, but the power she gives you you mentally to the point where when you do die, you have to be deleted. Sorry, dude. Wow. I was like, this is great. Then, as far as I can tell, everybody's dead. Just the world's over. Everybody's gone. Bring who can come back to the core, back to the core. The end. I guess everybody's dead now. It's like, Jesus Christ. That human experiment that they really, really wanted on the core, those minds in the core that wanted to go live up there, yeah, that experiment failed. And now we're just all going to live back in the core like we started, apparently. And then, of course, this all dovetails relatively nicely into Knights of Sidonia. And I feel like this very well could be the exact same Aposimz from Knights of Sidonia. Now, we actually do see Aposimz in Knights of Sidonia, and it is a ship, not a planet. But that doesn't really mess with any of the logic, because when it went off on its own, this could very well be very far in the future, and that ship could have built itself out into a planet by now. And we know, if we've learned anything from Blam, things in Nihei's universe can just start to build themselves and can build into vast, vast things. So the idea of a ship building itself out into a planet isn't that crazy of a thought. Then we also know that there was never any people on this planet to begin with. It was only ever a digital database, a bank of information holding human minds. So what if, in the great catastrophe that was whatever happened to humanity prior to Knights of Sidonia, and Knights of Sidonia is a seed ship to save a portion of humanity. What if there were multiple seed ships with multiple different contingency plans for humanity? One of those was Sidonia, with actual live human beings and that immortal council that was there to keep everything together and in line. What if one of the seed ships had no people on it at all and was just a digital bank of human minds, and it was sent off in a different direction, a different theory, a different idea, a different way of preserving humanity? Make multiple contingency plans, because we don't know which one's going to work, but we know we're now, and we're going to shoot off all these different ideas in different directions. And that then is the future of the Aposimz ship that then became this, and it built itself out, and it ran this its own little experiment. What if we let some of these people live on the surface? And maybe that was able to create the people on the surface out of this genetic material that it had on hand, because it was also provided with that genetic material in order to create people from the minds in the database at a later date. Right? Am I wrong? Is that completely whack job, left field? I don't even know. But that's also one of the things that really makes this so great to me, is just the things that my mind does with it at the end of it. That even if you just get rid of the Knights of Sidonia connection and you just think about the implications of how f***ed it was, what she did to the Emperor. Did she know that that was what was going to happen to him? I think she genuinely tried to give him what she thought was the right power in order to keep everything under control. But that power just warped and twisted and manipulated and ruined him to the point where now his entire consciousness has to be deleted. And it's just everything, all of the concepts, everything that went into it. When that ending was dropped on me, I thought, Jesus Christ, this just took what was kind of like a real average kind of a read and just knocked it to the next level. I thought it was great. I don't know. Anyway, absolutely fabulous. I loved it. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to shut up now. And as always, everybody, the link for my Patreon's in the description below. The link for my Discord's in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.